Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Well, welcome everybody to the Must Read Alaska Show. I'm your host, John Quick, coming to you live from somewhere in Alaska. If you live anywhere near from Valdez to Kenai to Anchorage, you've probably got some significant amount of snow. We've probably got, I don't know, 1.5 to 2 feet of snow in the last 24 hours plus here on the Kenai Peninsula. And the kids love it. The dogs love it. My cat does not know what to think about it yet, but she's still got a full winter to get used to it. We got 2 brand new cats, and this is their first winter seeing snow. So this will be interesting. And if you've been living under a rug or in a closet, you don't know that it's election season time, and man, we are so close to being able to, some of us have probably already voted, but being able to be November 8th and have a lot of folks in Alaska vote on November 8th, which is very exciting. And so we're going to talk about something that should matter to every Alaskan in our great state, and that is the Constitutional Convention. Today I have an awesome guest, none other than the Senate Majority Leader Shelley Hughes, and she is a force to be reckoned with. She is a powerhouse. I'm pretty sure that she has won all of her elections by something like 70%, which is unheard of. And so welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, Senator Hughes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And notice, John, the snow is creating lots of great natural light as well. So here we are. It's bright and light, and that's a good starting place for talking about what's going to be on the ballot, to shine some bright light on what's going to be for us. And thank you for having me. I want to talk about the Constitutional Convention because I believe it is more important actually than my race or any other state legislative race for that matter. I really do, because I think it's a defining moment for this generation and our children and grandchildren. We have an opportunity, and it is, as I have dubbed it, a David versus Goliath battle. I have an op-ed actually that's running, I believe, in about 6 or 7 publications as of today, statewide. And so folks can certainly read that. And if they Google David versus Goliath, they can find it with my name. And it will sum up a lot of what we're probably going to talk about today.
Well, that's exciting. I think I've had a lot of conversations with folks that, don't even know what the Constitutional Convention is, and that's no fault of their own. They got day jobs and soccer practices and hockey practices and kids in middle school or college, and they're running around buying groceries. And so tell us why it's on the ballot and what is the Constitutional Convention for folks that, maybe this is their first time ever hearing about it.
So I can relate to being just full on with the family, because I had those years too. And that's why people like me want to come to Alaskans to kind of fill them in, because we understand. And I'm glad people are focused on their families. The question appears on the ballot every 10 years after the census, because the framers made it a requirement in the Constitution when they convened in 1955. That every 10 years, the question would be asked to the people. And one of the reasons why I am really passionate about it is because 2 years ago, ranked choice voting passed. Remember that ballot measure? Mm-hmm. And I came out and spoke against it. But I regret now that I didn't invest more time getting the word out to people so they better understood what was going to be on the ballot. So I have devoted pretty much 100% of my time to this effort, even if it means I lose votes in my own Senate race, because I think this is so important for a better Alaska and a better future. And that's not just rhetoric. We can talk about specifically how that can play out.
Well, I like that. I think that speaks volumes, because I think anytime that an elected official believes passionately enough to be okay with losing some votes, it really means that they believe in what they're talking about. And so I appreciate that you not only are saying that, but you're walking the walk. You know, you're doing some op-eds, you're going on podcasts, speaking in favor of the Constitutional Convention. So why should this be important to the everyday Alaskan? They're going to go to the ballot box. They're going to see, should I vote yes or no? They know that it's, you know, they're listening to this podcast now. It's on the ballot box every 10 years. But why should it be important to the, you know, stay-at-home dad or the hockey mom here in Alaska?
Well, the status quo is kind of so-so, and it's not working as well as how things could work in our state if we took care of a few matters. And it will improve the economy if we have a state constitutional convention. I fully believe, and I can explain why. It will also allow the gridlock legislature to address some really important issues that have nothing to do with the fiscal matters, which is the primary reason why I believe we need to have a constitutional convention. But there are a lot of things that have been shoved aside that are really important to families and to moms and dads. It took us 7 years to get a bill through to allow children, to ensure children, and we're getting a good reading program where the schools would be held accountable to make sure they had every opportunity to be proficient readers by the end of the 3rd grade. Why did that take 7 years, John? Yeah. It took 7 years because of the fiscal gridlock in the legislature. We are the worst state in the nation for sexual assault. Prosecutors needed a tool to get rapists off the street. Why has sexual assault not been a priority of the legislature? Because we've been wrapped around the axle on the fiscal matters, the PFD amount, for 7 years. No. Why have bills that would address reducing healthcare costs died in committee? Because of the PFD gridlock. So all those things, whether it's our children doing well in school, we worked on K through 3rd grade, we need to work on 4th through 12th grade. So whether it's education, cost of healthcare, crime, those are all things that have not been properly addressed, and that's detrimental to Alaska. And then on the economic end, the uncertainty has not created a business-friendly environment. And this fiscal uncertainty goes back to the 1990s when the idea of the need for a fiscal plan was being discussed. So we're going in the third decade. And ICER, if you haven't heard of ICER, it's the Institute of Social and Economic Research housed at the University of Alaska. They basically have indicated that for every year we haven't had fiscal certainty at the state level, we have lost out on more than $500 million in private capital investment into our economy. So that means we have missed out on high-paying jobs. We have missed out on a strengthened economy. So yes, it's important to dads and moms, grandmas and grandpas that we do this, that we have the Constitutional Convention and have an opportunity to address some things the legislature hasn't been willing to address.
I think that that's a great point. And, oftentimes, I talk to elected officials and they themselves might have some phenomenal ideas, but then convincing the majority of either the House or the Senate is a whole nother ballgame. And when you factor in the permanent fund is always the topic, at least, for the last 5-6 years, it's really hard to get anything else done. And to your point, this provides an opportunity to squash some of those things that have been the trump cards, for lack of a better word, in the room and sucked out all the air. And so I think that, that the folks that are for the Constitutional Convention, all I hear from them is opportunity. I hear positive messages. I hear freedom. I hear really a lack of fear in the process. From the other side, which we're going to talk about, the folks that are no on the Constitutional Convention, really all I hear is fear-mongering, outside money coming in. The ads, if people probably heard them, it's pretty much all outside money. And, oh, you don't want to do this, it's going to create a doomsday kind of scenario. Senator, talk to me a little bit about as you've listened to some of these ads, what do you think about them? What are you hearing from folks as they, probably listen to them and then call you? What the heck is this, even mean? Tell me your thoughts on these no on convention ads we're all hearing.
Well, first I want to make a pitch. 28 days prior to the election, so whatever date that would be, 4 weeks out, I started a countdown series to help alleviate the fears, because I was listening to those ads, John, and I thought, this is over the top ridiculous. People need to have accurate information. They need to understand the process. They need to understand historically, more than 230 state constitutional conventions have been held across our nation, and not one of them did a worm escape a can, John. In not one of them did Pandora's box fly open and chaos ensue. In not one of them was the economy upended, or the state government upended, or a whole constitution thrown out and rewritten. So what they are saying is simply not true. And so we've been working hard to help Alaskans understand that the framers put this convention provision in the Constitution for a reason, and the reason is now. And the reason I'd like to explain, because a lot of people also say, well, there's a provision for the legislature to make these amendments. Why haven't you done it? Why are you gridlocked? Well, I've been reading some scholarly articles about state conventions around the country, and that's why I know they've all been conducted successfully and peacefully, and no crazy amendments have made it through. They've all been sane and reasonable. But in that process, one of the things you learn when you look into it is conventions have been called specifically to the 3 top reasons have been for reapportionment, finances, and judicial structure and selection. Now that's nationally in the 19th and 20th century. So finances, why do the people need to be called for a convention? Why do we need delegates? It boils down to the fact that legislators hesitate restricting their own legislative spending power. And that is what we have seen the last 7 years. Economists, budget gurus, the bipartisan fiscal working group, and even Alaskans, it's polled in the high 60% range, understand that getting our fiscal house in order is going to involve 2 things: settling the PFD matter and getting a reasonable spending cap in the Constitution. So there's wide, broad agreement for that. Why? And there have been multiple proposals, multiple constitutional amendment proposals by legislators to do those 2 things. And yet we cannot get the votes because legislators don't want to restrict their own spending power. They want to be able to do what they want to the budget. Some want to be able to reach into the permanent fund dividend cookie jar at will. And so we haven't been able to get the votes. We've gotten really close, and at some points we've gotten a simple majority. So 11 out of 20 in the Senate and 21 out of 40 in the House. But the legislative amendment process involves a 2/3. It requires a 2/3 vote. So that means not 11, but 14 in the Senate, not 21, but 27 in the House. And frankly, John, we haven't been able to reach that threshold. But here's the beauty. The delegates don't have to have a 2/3 threshold. They only need a simple majority. And guess what? They're not going to hesitate restricting legislative spending power. They're not going to have the same conflict of interest. They're not going to be focused on the annual budget and the annual PFD amount for the year. They're going to be there with a long-term mindset of how do we fix, what's a solution that's going to work and stand up for years to come.
I like that. I think that the Constitutional Convention actually scares the folks that don't want it. It almost puts the fear of God into them, because holy crap, the people of Alaska could actually make a stand here and form a delegation and rewrite some of these rules that have been driving us crazy for the last 2 or 3 decades. And I think that that's very scary for what the everyday person calls the swamp, the special interest groups that help run and interfere with government in a lot of ways. And I think that the easiest way for folks to make a difference now is to vote yes on the convention and to have the people's voice when it comes to important things in Alaska. And so, Senator Hughes, tell me, we've talked a little bit about why this should be important for, the everyday Alaskan, why it's on the ballot box to begin with, some of the crazy attack ads that we hear out there. But specifically, why is it important to you? I think that your story of getting involved as an elected official is just a phenomenal story to begin with. It happened to, if I remember correctly, it happens to deal with a stoplight in your section of the Wasilla, and wanting to make a difference in a small way. And so I think that you've kind of been able to keep that mantra throughout your elected official life, and that shows how you dominate at 70% of winning 70% every time you are up for re-election. The people seem to trust you. And so why is this important to you specifically? I think that is very important to talk about, because as an elected official, as the majority leader, as somebody who conservatives look to, they're going to want to hear, why is this important to you?
It is because I've experienced up close and personal, John, what's happened. So I served before Walker, former Governor Walker, vetoed part of the PFD, and the courts ruled that legislators don't need to follow the formula, that they can just pick the amount for the PFD. So I served prior to that time, and I saw how the legislature functioned when they simply followed that formula and focused on the issues of the day, and were addressing topics other than the finances, other policy considerations that would be helpful to Alaska. And then I served after the court ruling. And so I have experienced up close and personal the total dysfunction. And as I stated earlier, how it's bled over into other areas that are detrimental to Alaska because the legislature is not functioning. So because I care, and those aren't words, I really care. And I've been spending a ridiculous amount of hours on this because I care, and I think this is the best. And I will tell you, ranked choice voting, we got fooled. And I, however this goes, it's going to be a miracle. It's going to be a miracle if this passes. But I do know if I stepped up, I was opposed to the ranked choice voting ballot measure, but if I had stepped up and been more vocal, maybe it wouldn't have passed. It only passed by 1%. So I decided a month or so ago that I was going to go whole hog and really focus on that, so Alaskans would have the best information and that we would have a chance against the dark money. And you know what? I want to make this point, because a lot of genuine, sincere Alaskans, they're concerned that dark money would then, if we had a convention, the dark money would filter in and cause bad things to happen. So I'd like to address that, if that's okay with you, John.
Yeah.
So first of all, if we vote yes and it passes the finish line, we will have said no. We will put up, our nose to dark money, and we would say, hey, dark money, we're not listening to you. So that would put us in a good stead. But I also again, history has shown that extremists are not elected to the convention as delegates, because the same voters, all those moms and dads and grandpas and grandmas out there, and small business owners, second, I need a drink.
Yep.
They're the voters, and they're the ones that elect the legislators, and they will be the ones that elect the delegates. And just like the legislators across the state more or less reflect the values of Alaskans, the same thing's going to happen with the delegates. So it's not going to be packed full of extremists on one side or the other. It's going to represent Alaskans' values. So history shows us that the extreme stuff doesn't get through. And, outside right now, that outside money is extremely liberal. It's very liberal. The 1630 Foundation has very troubling social agenda, for example. And NEA, if they're worried about funding, if they're worried, they should look to Florida. Florida has school choice, and you know what? Jonathan, the schools there are absolutely flourishing. The public schools are flourishing because those schools know they have to be accountable to those parents, and they're doing an excellent job. And nationally, Florida's way at the top as far as academic performance. So NEA shouldn't be worried. It's actually, like I've said, when you do the right thing, the rising tide lifts all boats. And I think the public schools will improve if the delegates choose to fix the part of our Constitution, which actually right now is out of sync with US Supreme Court rulings. And actually, people don't realize this too. It says no public dollars can go to private institutions, but we're already kind of violating that because money is going to Head Start, which is private sector. Money is going to students for student loans in colleges that are private. So fixing that is not going to decimate our public schools. It's going to improve them. So what was your question?
I like that. No, you answered it.
I'm so passionate about this.
I love it. So let's say, we're on, I don't know, it's probably going to take a couple weeks to count every last vote, but let's say we're, mid-November, we have the final say, and the convention, enough people vote yes for it, we're going to have the convention. Walk us through, what does that practically look like for the next, I don't know, the time frame doesn't matter so much as the steps, but let's say the next year, going from we vote and approve the convention to, something appearing on the ballot a year later for folks to be able to vote on.
So if it passes, it will become a huge focus of the next legislative session, because the legislature has a chance to set some parameters with the process. The question is, well, we don't know who's going to be elected and if there would be the votes to do that kind of thing. If they wouldn't, it falls back on the lieutenant governor to model after the first state convention. In territorial law, there were guidelines and a process put in place as far as the selection of delegates, so it would default to that. But even if the legislature does agree on a bill, it will probably more or less update that, which means delegates would be selected by districts. And that would occur on the next regular election, so that'd be 2024, unless a special election were called. I'd be an advocate for calling a special election, because think of what's going to be on the ballot in 2024. That's going to be presidential. That is going to be, will Senator Dan Sullivan be up in 2024? I'm not sure if he will be. But anyway, just being the fact that it's presidential and all the legislative races, I think a focus on the delegate selection should be separate. And I think there will be intense vetting, intense interest, because people will know a lot is at stake, and they will know this is our opportunity to take care of matters. So I think having a separate special election will be the way to go. In that, if the legislature passes a bill, they could pick the location and the date. If they don't, then the lieutenant governor would do that. I'm going to assume that's going to be our next lieutenant governor will be Nancy Dahlstrom. I believe, and I've actually suggested to who I hope will be our next lieutenant governor, Nancy Dahlstrom, that I think it should be on the road system. I think Fairbanks would be fabulous, being that historically was the first location. And I think that it should occur during the regular legislative session. Our Constitution does allow legislators to run, and that's been an argument people have had too. I actually would like to see that fixed, but I want to tell you how that came about, John. Before 1955, some of our territorial legislators lobbied our delegation in Congress to change a federal law that did not allow someone to hold dual offices, and that was fixed. And so there were, I can't remember if it was 6 territorial legislators that served as delegates out of 55. And a few in the other states, since that federal law change, have also served, but very few have. And actually, voters tend not to want legislators to serve because they figure legislators have their chance to fix this. And so because of the conflict of interest as well. So very few have served across the country. And I would not expect many to do it this time, particularly if it were held in Fairbanks, let's say between January and April,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
So we get the delegation. What does this delegation do? What are they tasked with? Are they sequestered into a room for 4 months, or, what does that kind of look like? And then what does it look like for them to move something forward to then be on, potentially be on a ballot a year from there?
Okay, so the delegates would convene, and if a bill doesn't pass, it would be modeled after 1955, which was a 75-day session with some pre and post work. It probably would be something like that. And, one of the arguments is the entire Constitution will be on the table and will be rewritten. Well, yes, guess what? The entire Constitution has been on the table for 63 years for the legislators. So I don't buy that argument. And if you do the math, over 63 years, the legislature has been in session for more than 7,500 days, and we're talking a mere 75 days. So really, it's not going to be rewritten. It's going to be incredibly public process. There will be committees on different parts of the Constitution, and it will be more transparent than any state constitution in U.S. history because of the immediate ability to learn information and follow things. And as I said on a panel, I think that we will know what the delegates are having for breakfast every day because, Alaskans are going to be following things closely, and we will be holding delegates accountable. So it'll be a very public process with committees, public hearings, chance for people to weigh in. And actually, let me back up. During the election process, I think that is going to be a very transparent time of vetting, and there will be town halls, community meetings to understand where the delegates stand on different things. And I'll take a moment here to say that I love Bob Byrd as a person, but I do not agree with some of his proposals. So if you hear a proposal, and he actually wrote the statement in the official election pamphlet, and it's been confusing to people because he's inserting his particular ideas of what he thinks should happen. And guess what? Bob cannot control what the delegates do. I can't force them to do what I want in this particular thing. But what I do know is there is a broad agreement on getting our fiscal house in order. So I do think those items will come forward. Some of the hot cultural button items, I do think that we should be brave enough to have those conversations. I don't know how Alaskans will come down on those, but everybody has to remember the delegates only propose the amendments and then they go to the voters for approval. So I think we should have those conversations instead of leaving it to the courts and leaving it to a gridlocked legislature.
Amen to that. And every day of the week, I would rather have the decision in the people's hands as opposed to a couple judges' hands. And I think that this is such a unique process that, that it warrants itself for everyday Alaskans to get involved in. And the first step in doing that is voting yes. There's, you're only going to have an opportunity 10 years from now. So this is not something that comes around all the time. This is every 10 years, you have a unique opportunity to really go back to the basics and have a different look at something that you may not otherwise have an opportunity to do. Just like Senator Hughes alluded to, it takes 2/3 right now, 2/3 majority to do anything that the delegation could potentially do with a simple majority. Now, the fear of, the whole Constitution is going to be upended. I don't buy into that either, Senator. I think that, by the time you get to the delegation to have a simple majority of agreeing on something and then it going on the ballot, and then it has to pass there as well, you're really going to be left with maybe 1 or 2 items, 3 items that people care about enough to even land on the ballot. And I think it's going to be a lot of work, but anything worthwhile is usually going to take a lot of work. And I think that there's a lot of folks in Alaska that are willing to do the work and be a part of the process like you are Senator. Do you have any last minute thoughts here before we head off?
Yeah,
on the
well,
convention?
there's risk in everything, and we don't know how things are going to unfold. Even when we get up in the morning, we don't know how our day is going to unfold. I don't know when I get in my car and go to the grocery store if I'm going to make it there alive. But I tell you, every time I've gotten it in the car, I've gotten there alive, right? So there are a few unknowns, but history demonstrates that this can be done safely and peacefully. And I want to say, because the other states, the top reasons included finances and judicial structure and selection, people need to understand, and I don't want people to put words in my mouth, but people need to know what Lauren Lehman said in the late 80s when the Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the governor of the executive branch, that he was told by a Democratic House leader point blank that the Democrats control the judiciary. We want the judiciary to be of, for, and by the people, just like the other branches, and it should be as apolitical as possible. So if there is something, if the delegates decide to do some reform as far as judicial selection, like other states have done, the goal is not to have a Republican-controlled judiciary. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about having it be of, for, and by the people, and to have balance and to be fair. And right now, it just isn't. And when a House Democrat leader is bragging that the Democrats control the judiciary branch, we have to perk our ears up and listen to that and see that, hey, maybe it's time to fix that.
Amen to that. Well, I really appreciate you joining us, Senator Hughes, for this, 40 minutes here or so talking about the Constitutional Convention. And I'll put a link into the episode here of the op-ed that you did. So if people want to just kind of read more about it, they can. And I really appreciate your work on this. It's hopefully going to be very fruitful, and I'm very hopeful that we're going to see this pass come, mid-November when we get some data back. I really appreciate you joining us, and I'm going to have Kelly.
Before you close, Jonathan,
Yep.
John, I want to say one more thing. Just because that op-ed is written, hopefully later today there's going to be a video version for those that prefer listening rather than reading. So stay tuned for that. And what that op-ed does, it basically addresses it counters everything the other side has said and actually makes the case and kind of explains why this is the time and why it's necessary and safe.
Awesome. Well, we'll put that, as soon as we get that link, we'll put that in the episode as well. And tomorrow, folks, you can join us at, I think 9 o'clock. We're going to have Kelly Chewbacca on talking about how her campaign is going, and any latest news bits from her campaign. We'll hear directly from her. Until next time, I'm John Quick from somewhere in Alaska. Thank you so much.